It was late evening when the man walked down the quiet street with a small box of food in his hand. The night air was cool, and the street lamps cast long shadows across the pavement. He was tired after a long day of work, but his steps were steady. He carried leftovers, the kind of meal he could have eaten himself, but his heart was too soft for the animals that waited in the alleys. For months, he had been leaving food for stray cats and dogs that gathered near the corner of the old park. He never told anyone about it. It was a small habit, something that made him feel human in a world that was often cold. His friends thought he was strange for wasting food on animals, but he didn't care. Those hungry eyes meant more to him than careless words. As he reached the familiar spot, he stopped by the broken fence where he always left the box. A few cats were already waiting, their glowing eyes blinking at him from the shadows. A thin dog limped closer, wagging its tail weakly. He smiled softly, crouched, and placed the box on the ground. "There you go," he whispered. "Eat well tonight." The animals sniffed the box, meowing and whining softly. He stood back, watching them eat with quiet satisfaction. In that moment, the world felt peaceful. He turned away, ready to walk home. But then something shifted behind him. He froze. It wasn't the usual sound of paws or claws. It was different, softer, lighter, almost like footsteps, slow, hesitant, and yet not human. His heart skipped a beat as he turned his head slightly at first. He thought his eyes were tricking him. But no, standing near the edge of the broken fence, just beyond the animals, were three figures. They were not strays, or not people. They were something else. Three girls stood in the dim light, their faces thin and pale, their large eyes reflecting the glow of the street lamp. Their bodies were covered in ragged cloth that looked too big for them, as if they had picked them up from somewhere. Else their skin shimmered faintly, not like normal skin. And their eyes, those eyes were wider, deeper, and hungrier than anything he had ever seen. They didn't speak. They didn't move closer. They only stared at the food, at the animals tearing into the leftovers. Their expressions were a mixture of longing and fear, as if they wanted to step forward, but something inside held them back. The man's breath caught in his throat. He had seen homeless children before, but this was different. Their faces were not fully human. Their features were strange cheekbones too sharp, skin too smooth, and eyes that seemed almost glowing in the dark. For a moment, no one moved. The animals ate, the girls stared, and the man stood frozen. Then one of the girls stepped forward. Her bare feet touched the cold ground with care, and her hands trembled slightly as she lifted them, pointing at the food. His heart softened. He understood hunger. That was all it was. Hunger. They were starving. Slowly he bent down again, opened another small packet from his bag, and placed it near the edge of the fence. His fingers shook, not out of fear, but from the strange weight of the moment. "It's okay," he said quietly, his voice barely a whisper. "It's food. Take it." The girls exchanged glances. They didn't speak, but their eyes carried messages between them. Finally, the smallest one, no older in appearance than a teenager, moved closer. She crouched, her long fingers touching the edge of the box carefully, as if testing if it was safe. Then she pulled it back and sniffed the food. Her eyes widened, and in a heartbeat she began to eat. The other two joined her, their movements fast and desperate, like beings who had not eaten in days. They made no sound except for the soft rustle of cloth and the faint noise of chewing. The man stood still, watching in disbelief. There was something strange about them, something that told him they were not from this world. The way their skin caught the light, the shape of their hands, the silence of their mouths that formed no words. But the hunger that was the same. Hunger was universal. Hunger was human too. As they ate, their shoulders relaxed, their faces softened with relief, their wide eyes closing for a moment, as if savoring not just the food but the kindness behind it. The man felt a strange pull in his chest. He didn't know who they were or where they came from, but in their hunger, he saw something he recognized, something that made him feel responsible. The animals backed away now, giving space to the strange girls. The man noticed it too. The strays, who were usually bold and noisy, had gone quiet. Their glowing eyes watched from a distance, almost wary, as if they knew these girls were not like them, not like him either. The night grew colder, but the man couldn't bring himself to leave. He simply stood there, silent, as the three girls finished every crumb. When they were done, they looked up at him together. For a second, the world felt frozen. 3 pairs of alien eyes locked on his, carrying a silent message he could not fully understand. But he understood enough. They were not just hungry. They needed more. And, somehow, they had chosen him. The man swallowed hard, his chest tightening. He didn't know why, but in that moment, he felt it deep in his bones. His life was about to change forever. The man didn't sleep that night. He sat by his small window, staring at the moon, hearing again the silent way those 3 strange girls had eaten. Their faces haunted him. It wasn't just hunger he had seen in their eyes. It was something deeper, something that made his chest tighten, a cry for help, without words. By morning, he told himself it was just his imagination. Maybe they were just lost children, sick or abandoned. Maybe his mind had filled the gaps with something else. But deep inside, he knew better. Their pale glowing skin, the sharpness of their features. The way the animals stepped back in fear, it wasn't human. That evening, he carried food again. His steps felt heavier than usual, as if the whole day had been leading to this moment. When he reached the broken fence, the animals were already waiting. But tonight their movements were restless, nervous. As the cats hissed at Shadows, the dog stayed back. The man knew why. He looked around. At first, there was nothing. Then he felt it, the weight of eyes. He turned, and there they were again. His 3 girls, standing where the light was weakest. Their eyes shone faintly, like reflections of stars. Not just hungry eyes. Eyes that carried questions, fear, and something else. Trust, the smallest one, stepped forward first. Her thin arms wrapped around her body as if she were cold, though the night was mild. She didn't speak, but her eyes locked onto his, and he felt it like a whisper in his mind. A plea, a request. He placed the food on the ground and stepped back. This time he didn't just drop it and leave. He stayed, watched. They came forward slowly, their movements cautious, their long fingers trembling. When they crouched by the food, he noticed their skin glowing faintly in rhythm with their breaths, almost like their bodies were too weak to hide what they truly were. The second girl, taller, looked up at him as she ate. Her eyes were sharper than the others, like blades cutting through the dark. For a moment, he thought she was testing him, masking silently if he was safe, if he would harm them. He didn't move, only lowered his gaze, showing he meant no harm. Something flickered across her face, approval. Maybe the third girl, the oldest looking, didn't touch the food right away. Instead, she kept her eyes fixed on him, watching his every move. Her gaze was heavy, filled with suspicion. It wasn't the hunger in her that struck him, but the weight of responsibility. She was protecting the other 2. She wanted to trust him, but couldn't yet. And then, suddenly, it happened. The smallest one dropped the piece of bread she was eating. Her eyes widened, and she let out a sound, a soft, trembling note like music broken by pain. The man froze. It wasn't words, not exactly, but it wasn't just noise either. It was a sound that carried meaning straight into his heart. He understood without understanding. She was saying thank you. The other 2 girls looked at her, then at him. For the first time, their suspicion softened, the tall one's sharp gaze lowered, the eldest's shoulders eased just slightly. It was as if that small sound had broken something, an invisible wall between them. The man felt his throat tighten. He wanted to ask who they were, where they came from, but his voice caught. He knew they wouldn't answer, at least not yet. Still, their eyes told him something. A warning, a truth. They were not safe, not in this world. Now by helping them, neither was he. The night grew colder, but none of them moved for a long time. The food was gone, but the silence remained, heavy with unspoken things. Finally, the 3 girls backed away into the shadows. But as they left, the smallest one looked over her shoulder, her glowing eyes meeting his once more. not just hungry eyes, eyes that asked him to follow. And the man standing in the middle of the empty street realized he already had. The following night was different. The man did not walk with casual steps or the easy calm of habit. He walked with purpose, carrying a larger bag of food. His mind replayed the smallest girl's trembling sound, half song, half cry, that had slipped past his heart and refused to leave. That sound had not been noise, it had been a plea. When he reached the broken fence, the animals were gone. Not a single cat, not the limping dog. The corner, once full of soft growls and meows, was empty. Too empty. The silence pressed on his ears, heavy and unnatural. He stopped, scanning the shadows. Then he felt it again, the weight of eyes. Stepped out of the darkness together, the three girls. This time, they did not hesitate. They came closer, their movements still cautious but less hidden, as if some invisible barrier had been lowered since last night. Their ragged clothes clung to their thin frames, and their strange, glowing skin caught the weak light in ways that made them look both fragile and unearthly. The man knelt down, spreading the food on the ground. Bread, rice, a few fruits. He expected them to rush forward, but they didn't. Instead, they looked at him, waiting. The smallest girl tilted her head, her wide eyes shining with something more than hunger. A question. He realized they weren't asking for just food anymore. They wanted to know if they could trust him. With slow, steady movements, he pushed the food closer and stepped back, holding his hands open at his sides. His heart beat fast, but his face remained calm. He wanted them to see he meant no harm, finally. The oldest girl crouched down. She picked up a piece of fruit and broke it in half, handing the smaller piece to the youngest. The smallest girl accepted it with shaking hands, her lips parting in relief. The tall one followed, grabbing bread and chewing quickly, like someone who had forgotten what comfort tasted like as they ate. Their strange glow pulsed faintly, as though food brought not only life, but light into their bodies. The man couldn't look away. Every bite seemed to transform them, chase away the shadows from their faces, even if only for a moment. Then it happened again. The smallest girl lifted her eyes to him. Her lips moved, no words, only shapes, but he heard something in his head, a soundless message. It wasn't language, but he understood it all the same. Simple plea, carried by her gaze. Don't leave. The words were never spoken, but he felt them as real as breath. His chest tightened. He realized then that her earlier note, that trembling cry, hadn't been just gratitude. It had been connection. Somehow, she could reach him. He swallowed hard, kneeling a little closer. I'm not leaving, he whispered. His voice soft, though he doubted they understood the words. Still, the smallest girl's eyes softened, her trembling hands steadied. She believed him, but the eldest didn't. She stared at him sharply, her eyes hard and cold, as if measuring his every move. She did not trust Isley, not with the weight she carried. She pulled the two younger ones closer, wrapping an arm protectively around them. For a brief second, he saw not an alien, but a sister, guardian, someone who had seen too much fear to let anyone near. The man lowered his eyes, showing respect. He would not force their trust. He would earn it. The three ate in silence there, soft chewing, mixing with the distant hum of the city. When the food was gone, they did not run this time. They lingered, watching him, measuring him. Trust was fragile, but it was forming. The smallest girl took one step closer. She lifted her hands slowly, carefully, as if every movement was a risk. Her fingers, long and thin, hovered in the air between them, not touching, not pulling back. Just waiting, the man hesitated only a moment before he lifted his own hand. He didn't reach out fully, only mirrored her. His hand hovered close, but not touching hers. The air between their fingers felt alive, buzzing with something unspoken. Her eyes widened, glowing brighter for just a heartbeat. And in that moment, he felt it, again the silent plea. Help us. The words weren't spoken. They didn't need to be. And deep inside, he knew he had already said yes. The man's routine changed. He no longer walked to the broken fence like a stranger leaving food for strays. Now he carried his bag with a sense of weight, as if every step pulled him closer to something he didn't yet understand. His life had always been ordinary work, sleep, quiet nights, but now shadows felt alive, and silence carried secrets. That evening the three girls were already waiting. Not hidden, not cautious. Stood in the half-light, their strange skin faintly glowing, their hollow eyes locked on him. Something about the way they stood together close like a single unit made him realize they weren't simply lost or weak. They were survivors. He placed food down, but this time none of them rushed. The eldest girl stepped forward first, her sharp gaze fixed on him. Her hand trembled as she pointed not at the food but at him. Then she touched her own chest. Slowly, carefully, she repeated the gesture. Him, then her. It wasn't hard to understand. She was trying to connect. The man hesitated. Then he mirrored the gesture, touching his chest. Human, he whispered softly, though he doubted she understood. His voice shook. He had never spoken to anyone like this, never tried to build meaning with silence and eyes. The eldest girl's face remained guarded, but she gave the smallest nod. Then, to his shock, she stretched her hand out not to him, but to the sky. Her long finger drew a trembling line across the stars. Her lips moved soundlessly, but her eyes filled with something heavy. Loss. The man followed her gaze upward. It hit him suddenly. She wasn't just pointing at the sky. She was pointing at where she came from. His stomach turned cold. He had suspected before, but now there was no doubt. These weren't abandoned children. They weren't from any place he knew. They had fallen from the stars. The smallest girl, the one whose silent cries reached him, tugged at her sister's arm and pointed to the food. Hunger still gnawed at them, even as they tried to speak truths he could barely understand. They crouched and ate quickly, but between bites, their eyes darted nervously toward the shadows, as though they feared someone or something was watching. That was when he noticed it. The animals hadn't come back. For nights, the corner had been filled with strays. Tonight, silence ruled, and silence meant danger. His skin prickled. He glanced down the street, heart hammering. Then faintly he saw them. Not the girls, not humans. Shapes moving in the dark. Too tall, too deliberate. Watching, his breath caught. Whoever or whatever those shapes were, they weren't there for him. They were searching for the girls. The eldest must have sensed his fear, because her eyes snapped to his, glowing brighter for just a moment. She shook her head sharply, her expression fierce. A warning. Don't speak. Don't move. The man swallowed. Hardin did as she asked. He stood still, pretending to look at nothing, while the girls hunched over the food. The shadows lingered for a while, then drifted away, melting into the night. Only when they were gone did the eldest release her breath. The man's chest felt heavy. He had just seen something no one else on earth would believe. The girls weren't only hungry, they were hunted. When they finished eating, the eldest stood, tall. Her shoulders were trembling, but her eyes were sharp. She stepped closer to him, closer than she ever had before, and with a hand still shaking, she drew a shape in the air, a circle. Then she slashed it with a line. He didn't understand. At first, but the youngest girl's eyes, wide and wet, made the meaning sink into him. A planet. Broken. Something terrible had happened to their home. The man's heart ached. He wanted to ask questions, wanted to know more, but he couldn't. They had no common words, only gestures, glances, and silent pleas. Still, it was enough. Enough. To know the truth. They weren't just starving, weren't just lost. They were refugees from a broken world, and now, in the shadows of his city, they were being hunted. The man could not forget the shadows he had seen. Those tall figures in the night had not moved like drunks or thieves. They had moved with purpose, scanning the alleys with silent precision. He knew then that the three alien girls were not just hiding from hunger, they were hiding from someone. The next evening, his steps carried both fear and determination. His bag of food felt heavier than ever, not because of weight, but because of what it meant. Each meal was no longer kindness, it was risk. Still, he walked to the broken fence. The girls were there. not waiting openly this time, but crouched, low in the shadows. Their eyes lit up faintly when they saw him, but tonight their glow looked weaker, almost dimmed. Hunger was still gnawing at them, and fear had drained their strength. He placed the food on the ground, but before they touched it, the eldest girl raised her hand sharply. A warning. She looked at him with burning eyes, then pointed to the rooftops, her body tense like a cornered animal. He followed her gaze. His stomach dropped. On the rooftop across the street, a figure crouched, silent, watching the man froze. His heart pounded in his chest, loud enough he thought it might give him away. The figure's eyes glinted faintly, reflecting the weak streetlight. Not human eyes, not animal eyes, something else entirely. The eldest girl moved quickly, pulling. The two younger ones behind her glow dimmed as though she was trying to hide it. She made another gesture at the man, a sharp slice across her lips. Be silent. Don't draw attention. The man nodded, forcing his breathing to slow. He stepped back from the food, acting casual, as if he were simply a passerby leaving scraps for animals. But his mind raced. Whoever was up there wasn't watching him. They were hunting the girls. The smallest girl tugged at her sister's arm, her glowing eyes wide with terror. She pressed close, shaking. The tall one clenched her fists, as if ready to fight despite her thin body. The eldest did not move, her eyes locked on the hunter above. The man took a chance. He coughed loudly, then walked away with slow, heavy steps, pretending to be leaving. His pulse hammered, but he forced himself not to look back. The hunter's gaze followed him for a moment, then shifted back toward the shadows where the girls hid. That was when he knew. The hunters weren't after him. They wanted the alien girls. And if he walked away now, those fragile beings would be taken. That night, the man did not sleep. He sat in the dark, the smallest girl's silent plea echoing in his head. Help us. The dangerous secret was clear now. The three alien girls weren't just starving refugees from a broken world, they were fugitives. Someone powerful was hunting them, even here on Earth, and by feeding them, by protecting them, even for a moment. He had placed himself in their fight. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling. His hands trembled. He had no weapons, no plan, no knowledge of who these hunters were. He was just one man, but still, he knew. Tomorrow night, he would return. Not just with food, with a choice. The man spent the whole day restless, moving through his routine like a ghost. At work, his hands fumbled with tools, his mind circling back to the alley. At home, he stared at the bag of food he had prepared untouched on the table. His chest carried a weight heavier than fear it was responsibility. When the evening came, he walked again to the broken fence. His steps were slower now, not because of hesitation, but because of awareness. Each corner he passed could hide watchers. Each shadow could hold eyes. The city no longer felt like his. It felt like a hunting ground. The three girls were waiting, but not in the open. Tonight, they crouched deep in the alley, pressed against the wall like frightened birds. Their glow was faint, almost gone, as though hunger and fear had drained the last of their strength. When he knelt and opened the bag, they didn't move. Their eyes locked on his, wide and searching. Not just hungry, any more desperate. He pushed the food toward them, but before they touched it, the eldest leaned forward. Her hand pressed against his wrist, trembling but firm. Her eyes burned into his. They weren't asking for food. They were asking for something else. He swallowed hard. "What do you want from me?" he whispered, though he knew they couldn't understand his words. Still the smallest girl's gaze answered, a silent voice echoing in his head. "Stay." He froze. Wasn't just begging him not to leave. She was asking him to stand with them. His heart raced. Wanted to say yes, but he also knew the truth. He had seen the hunters. Tall, silent, patient. Whoever they weren't going to stop. By helping the girls, he was stepping into danger he couldn't even imagine. The tall girl grabbed a piece of food and stuffed it into the youngest's hands. Her own jaw tightened, eyes darting to the rooftops. She knew the hunters were near. She knew time was short. The man's throat went dry. He had a simple life, a quiet life, a life without risk. If he walked away now, he could still keep it. Nobody would know. Nobody would blame him. But then the smallest girl reached forward, her thin fingers brushing against his hand. Her glow flared faintly, weak but warm. The silent plea filled him again, clearer than ever. "Don't let them take us." The man closed his eyes. He saw strays he had fed for years, their hungry faces. He remembered the warmth he had always felt in small acts of kindness, and he realized something. So right here it was the same thing, except bigger, except heavier. This wasn't just about food. This was about life. His eyes opened, steady now. He looked at the eldest girl, meeting her sharp, suspicious gaze. For the first time, he didn't just look afraid or confused. He looked certain. He pointed at himself, then at them, and nodded firmly. The eldest froze. Her lips parted slightly, her eyes softening for just a heartbeat. Then she bowed her head just a fraction, but enough. She understood. The choice had been made. The man stood, lifting the empty bag. "If they're hunting you," he whispered into the night, "then they'll have to come through me first." The three alien girls ate quickly, their glow brightening. Just a little, enough to remind him they were alive. When they finished, they stayed close, no longer hiding in the shadows. The youngest clung to his arm. The tall one stood near, ready to guard. The eldest still watched every corner, but for the first time, she wasn't just protecting the others. She was allowing herself to be protected too. As the night deepened, the man walked with them, not away from danger, but straight into it. His quiet life was gone, but something greater had taken its place. For the first time, he wasn't walking alone. The night was colder than usual, the kind of cold that sank into bones. The man walked through the quiet street, but he was not alone anymore. The three alien girls moved at his side, their glow faint but steady. Each step carried more weight than the last. He was no longer just a stranger with food. He had become their shield. He knew the hunters would return. He could feel it in the silence that followed them, in the way shadows seemed to stretch longer, thicker, as if waiting. His breath came slow and careful. Every nerve in his body screamed at him to run, to drop this impossible burden. But he? The smallest girl clung to his sleeve, her trembling hand warm against his. The tall one scanned the alleys, her sharp eyes restless, ready to fight with whatever strength she had left. The eldest walked stiffly, her glow pulsing faintly as she kept her gaze on the rooftops. She still didn't trust him completely, but she no longer pushed him away. When they reached the old park, the hunters revealed themselves. Three tall figures stepped out of the darkness. Their shapes were wrong, too thin, too tall, their movements sharp and deliberate. Their eyes glowed with a cold light, nothing like the warmth of the girls. These were predators. The man's chest tightened, but he stood his ground, moved. In front of the girls, his body tense, his fists clenched, though he knew he couldn't win in a fight. Still, he refused to step back. The eldest girl let out a low sound, almost a growl, pulling the younger too close. Her glow flared brighter, but it was weak, flickering. She was ready to defend them with her last strength. Even if it meant falling, the hunters advanced slowly, their movements silent. One lifted a hand, pointing at the girls. Their intent was clear. They weren't here to talk. The man's mind raced. He had no weapons, no power. Only one thing, his humanity. So he did the only thing he could. He stepped forward, placing himself fully between the girls and the hunters. His voice cracked the silence. "They're not yours."
Oh.
The hunters paused, their glowing eyes fixed on him. His body shook, but he didn't back away. He thought of the stray animals he had fed, the soft meows, the wagging tails, the way life had always answered kindness with trust. He thought of the smallest girl's silent plea, "Help us," and he understood. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't strength at all, it was compassion. The man bent, picked up the food he had brought, and pushed it toward the hunters with steady hands. "If it's hunger," he said, his voice trembling but firm, "take mine, leave them." The hunters didn't move. Their heads tilted, their cold eyes flicking from him to the girls. Seconds stretched into eternity. Then, something unexpected happened. The smallest girl stepped out from behind him, her glow pulsing. Brighter, she pressed her thin hand to his back, then lifted her other hand toward the hunters. Her eyes glowed fiercely now, with fear but with defiance. For a moment the hunters stopped. Her light grew stronger, spreading to the tall sister, then the eldest. Together, their faint glow became brighter, sharper, filling the alley. With a quiet, radiant light, the man realized the truth. It wasn't the food that gave them strength. It was hope. His choice, his defiance. His willingness to stand for them, it had ignited something in them that fear could not kill. The hunters hissed softly, their cold glow dimming against the warmth of the girl's light. One by one they stepped back. Into the shadows, their tall frames fading, until the alley was empty again. The man let out a shaking breath, his legs weak beneath him. He turned to the girls. Their glow was softer now, fading back to its usual faint shimmer. But their eyes burned with something new: gratitude, relief, trust. The eldest bowed her head, not in weakness, but in respect. The tall one's lips trembled, almost forming a word. The smallest, her wide eyes shimmering with tears, reached up and touched his face gently. No sound, no language, but he heard her clearly in the silence. Thank you. The man swallowed hard. He realized then that his quiet, ordinary life was gone forever. He was bound to them now, not by force, but by choice. By the simple, dangerous, beautiful gift of humanity. And as the stars glimmered faintly above, he knew one truth. Sometimes the smallest act, sharing food, standing firm, could change not just lives, but destinies.